We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We are very much getting back to questions this week, so things are pretty much back to normal. Things have settled down on my end. We've established a new normal, so feeling good about that. Things are all looking up over here for my family that is taken care of there a couple weeks ago when I was away. So all good news. People can be happy about that. The hot weather has arrived in the lower mainland Vancouver area, and I'm unhappy about that because I don't like hot weather.
What's your definition of hot there, polar boy?
30s on the Celsius scale there, into the 30s.
30s is not
It's too
like
hot.
hot. It's
too hot.
Warm.
It's
I gotta
too
look
hot.
it up, actually.
Yeah, we're getting, 30, 32, 33, that type of thing. It's too hot for me. I know some people like it.
That's like 86. 32 is 89. That's not hot.
I wish
That's
it
like,
were Fahrenheit. I'd be much happier if that were 32, 33 Fahrenheit. I'd be happy about that.
That's Florida winter over here. People put on scarves. 86. What are you talking about?
No, you would not find it too hot here right now, but I'm uncomfortable.
So we've talked. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but I'm going on vacation in June. Yes, we talked about that on the podcast.
Mentioned. I mean, it was mentioned on the podcast when you were with Lee, so that was mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will be gone for the most, if not all of the month of June. So
Okay.
Rob will be doing whatever Rob does.
Yep.
We are going to San Francisco first for a wedding for my cousin.
Nice.
And my children are unprepared. Like, they do not believe us that there's weather outside of Florida that is different than Florida.
Yeah.
They are unprepared for this. And then we're going to go to Turkey
wind.
to see. Well, it's just they have, like, it's a different temperature at night than it is during the day.
Yeah.
Like,
it's still going to be
no
June,
concept
so
of
it's
that.
not like it's going to be freezing cold.
No, but it's going to be usually in the 70s or something like that, or maybe even a little bit cooler than that. Which for which for my kids is literally every article of clothing that they own worn at the same time. They are unprepared for that. I'm unprepared for it. All my winter stuff is gone, and I'm not going to want to. I'm not winter, but I mean
winter stuff in June.
Well, Florida winter. You're not understanding.
I guess I'm not.
The what Florida winter is like.
Okay.
It is a hoodie. Okay,
Right.
That is Florida winter. Is a hoodie.
And probably still warm enough that I definitely would not have a hoodie on in your Florida winter.
Probably. You might wear long sleeves. I mean, I don't know.
Seems unlikely.
It gets down. There was a couple of days that were freezing last year. Couple, maybe. I don't remember. Anyway, so we're doing that for a week or so, and then we go to Turkey for 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
So we're going to go see it was a trip that we had planned in June or July of 2020.
Okay.
So,
just
that
a little bit
didn't work
delayed for some reason or other.
Can't remember why. Had to cancel. Oh, I don't remember.
Hope you get some refunds on those airplane tickets.
We did. That was back. That was back when everybody was like, "We don't care. Just don't get on an airplane. Here's your money back."
Not too much of the sausage getting made behind the scenes, but how are we going to be handling the audio-only uploads? Are you going to be doing that from remotely, or?
I don't know. I honestly don't know if I'll even have internet access in many of the places that we're going to.
I mean, I've no problem creating it. It's just got to get uploaded to the server somehow, and I don't have access to that.
I'll be honest with you. I don't even remember how I access it. So I mean, it
gets there every week somehow. So.
But all those passwords are remembered by my Google, so why do I have to remember anything? So we'll figure
you can
this
look those up. Those passwords do exist. They're saved somewhere.
Who can be bothered? I got locked out of my Sam's app. It said it didn't remember who I was all of a sudden. It does that every once in a while, and for whatever reason, like my Pixel phone will not remember that password, even though it creates the password for me. Mm-hmm. It's like, we forgot. Okay. And I can't get it anywhere, so I have to recreate it every single time. Whatever.
Gotcha.
All right, so what did you watch? Who cares?
Okay. Did not watch a ton, but I did get around to seeing Nope.
I very much want to see that movie.
Okay.
And it's on Hulu, and I want to see it so bad.
Yeah.
But yet, I say I have no time. What I mean is, I get up really early to cycle, and I can't get the movie watched before I fall asleep.
That happens, yeah. And this is one definitely worth watching all the way through. So I think, because I remember when this came out in theaters, that the response to it, critical response to it, audience response to it, wasn't as strong as Jordan Peele's previous two movies, Get Out and Us, that this one was a little bit, had a few more negative reactions to it. And I can see why, because I think if this movie came out all on its own and you had no idea about Jordan Peele's previous movies, it wouldn't have had that reaction. It's that this is a little bit different from those previous two movies. It's still classified in the horror genre, but I don't really know that I would put it in the horror genre. It is not very scary. There's some slight little creepy bits throughout, but like, you know, the whole ending of the movie isn't meant to be horror. It's not horror. That's not what it is. This is a social commentary movie, which is not weird for Jordan Peele. He does a lot of social commentary. Sure. But this is more social commentary through being told through a metaphor than it is horror. And I think people who are going in wanting to be creeped out left disappointed because it's not really that creepy, except for a couple little sections earlier on. So I really liked the performances in this movie. People have praised Steven Yeun, and I will do so too. I wish there were more of him, honestly. I thought that the story going on with his character was actually maybe a little bit more interesting to me than the main plot of the movie. But yeah, the social commentary that was going on works on a couple of different levels. I think if you're watching it that way, it is really strong. If you're watching it purely as I'm just viewing it literally for what is taking place, I don't know that you're going to love it that much because it's not that wild or creative or scary or anything on that type of level. But I thought what they were saying by having these different characters viewing the events that are going on and how the attitudes of each of those characters creates the results when they're confronted by the events. I don't want to spoil anything for Tom or anyone else who hasn't watched it, but that's the way you're basically taking archetypes who are all reacting to the events that are going on. And if you view it through that lens, through a thematic and a metaphor type of lens, then I think it was very, very strong. So I enjoyed it a great deal. I will say I was watching it through Crave. They do not have HDR on Crave. This is yet another movie that really would benefit from being viewed in HDR, trying to do the realistic wee early morning hour type of scenes. Hoo boy, is that dark. And I know things are supposed to be obscured to keep it so that you can't really see what's going on, but at some points I was like, what is going on? I just can't see it. This needs to be in HDR for me to even see what's going on in these shadows. So yet again, there's a bit of that going on. So make sure your displays are well calibrated and you're watching in the dark. That was nope. I will just mention, I started watching the first few episodes of Welcome to Wrexham. That is the true documentary of Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney.
It seems to follow like the Ted Lasso, like,
well, I mean, but it's not scripted or anything like that.
I know, but I was like, because I follow that on something, one of the social media things. Yeah. And then they just won something that got them back into the league or something like that, which isn't that what was going on with? That's
right. They were in the 5th division, which is like below, it's the lowest you can be and still be a professional football player, soccer player. Okay. And I mean, before they were in the championship league, just one league below the Premier League, the very top league in international soccer. So, you know, they're trying to get back into at least tier 2, which is the 4th. And so, yeah, that, I mean, in real life, we know these results, they were successful in doing that. So yeah, couple of Hollywood stars, not really football experts whatsoever, soccer experts whatsoever, but decided to purchase this team in Wales. It is excellent. It is an excellent documentary, at least the first 4 episodes that I saw through. I am enjoying it tremendously. And yes, if you really love Ted Lasso and wanted something else, this would definitely slide right in. You would have no problem switching from Ted Lasso to this, and it would just fit perfectly and wonderfully. And it is great. I can't recommend it highly enough. So Welcome to Wrexham. Check it out if you haven't already.
Well, like I say, I haven't had a ton of time to watch stuff, but I did. It was Mother's Day this weekend, and my wife wanted to watch. I say that as if like she forced me to watch it, but I had seen the previews for it and went, "This looks really good. Let's watch this." Right. A Man Called Otto, which is the Tom Hanks movie based on some book.
Okay.
Which I don't know.
Is that on Apple TV Plus or?
That was on Netflix for me.
Oh, it was on Netflix. Okay.
Yeah. So, A Man Called Otto, and it's Tom Hanks and whatever. He's trying to play a grumpy old man, and he's Tom Hanks, so he does a good job of playing a grumpy old man. But you still spend the whole time going, yeah, it's Tom Hanks though. He's not really that grumpy. I'll be honest. I mean,
like if it were Tommy Lee Jones, you would buy it a little bit more.
I mean, there's a lot of actors out there who you're like already predisposed to assume that they're pretty grumpy, but you're like, it's Tom Hanks. Come on, I gotcha. Now. But he does a great job. His son is cast in the movie as his younger self, which
like the Colin Hanks son, I would guess, who does a lot more acting.
I don't know which one it was. I don't remember his name. Anyways, we went through and looked and made sure, because she was like, I heard it was son's son, so we looked, and my wife didn't think he was well cast. Somebody else should have played his son.
I mean, Colin Hanks does have definitely a similarity in appearance to Tom Hanks. So
I like I said, I don't know. She didn't think that he was well cast. I could care less, because I didn't really. I mean, I don't look at the person and go, do they actually look like they could turn into old Tom Hanks? I mean, whatever. He looked fine, and I thought he did a good enough job. The only real problem I had with the movie, acting is all good. The story is good. It's very emotional. For those,
just like the brief overview synopsis type of thing of what it's
right.
About.
So the overview of the movie is that, and you get this right away. So I'm not really giving anything away. Tom Hanks's wife has passed, and he's an old man, and he feels completely. He's very angry and about the whole world and everything changing all around him, and he's like, well, I'm going to go be with my wife. So that's the whole movie, is him trying to go be with his wife and then getting interrupted, and then whether or not he's going to complete that task. So a new family moves in next door, and they are the kind of the driving force for him being interrupted a lot. And generally well cast. The husband's supposed to be kind of this bumbling idiot, and I had a problem with that casting as well. He just looked like he was way too old to be that incompetent. Like, he should have been younger. I know that's ageist or whatever, but as far as I don't think that you can be at that age and not know the things that this man did not know in order to make the story work. He also did a fantastic job acting. Everybody did a good job acting. There was 2 little kids in there. They were amazing. I thought that they were very engaging and everything else. So this is a good. It's not. It's not really a feel good movie, but it's a drama with some comedic elements.
This isn't some big explosion action movie.
No, it is not. But we very much enjoyed it. It was just a touch over 2 hours. So I would recommend it. I would say if you're looking for something that that's got more a human interest side of it, but you still want to stay engaged in the story the whole time. I mean, there's no part of the story where I was like, is something going to start happening yet? There's always things happening in this movie, so it was definitely well scripted. Okay, so I liked it.
There we go. We liked everything we watched this week. Hooray!
Tom Hanks, the grumpy old man. Come on.
He
was in Big. He could still be that kid in there. We don't know.
Right.
He could still be that kid in there.
And I just say, even if you're shooting at night, turn some lights on. I'll suspend my disbelief.
I know, right?
I realize it's at night. You're out on a ranch. There wouldn't actually be any sources of light. But I'll suspend my disbelief so that I can see.
There's a moon. Let's just do that. Remember the good old days when they shoot in the daytime, and then they would.
That's right. Day for night.
They do that whatever thing.
I know it didn't look like real life, and yet I could see their faces. That kind of helped sometimes.
Kind of helped with the whole emoting part of this thing.
When someone is supposed to be terrified and they're trying to keep quiet at the same time.
Yeah.
Kind of helps if you can see their face.
See how they're looking.
Or any sense of what direction they're looking in. These things kind of help.
It reminds me of the old Tom and Jerry cartoons where they shut the lights out and all you can see is their eyes bouncing around the screen.
All right.
This is AV Rant podcast that sometimes answers your AV and home theater questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to AV Rant, find our old episodes, our show notes, and our Flickr album, so you can follow along with the pictures that we are talking about. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. You can contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. But if you want your question answered, question@avrant.com.
That's right.
Constructive criticism or just criticism in general, send it to lee@avrant.com.
There is that third email address. It's out there.
lee@avrant.com.
Yep.
Right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com. Well, actually, going to patreon.com/avrant podcast, where you can become one of our patrons. It's a monthly supporter. Every month, they'll take some money from you, give most of it to us. Right now, we have 139 of you, and we thank you all very much.
Yeah, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. A big thanks to our 139 patrons over there. And we'll just mention it. Tom started to say it. We haven't had any PayPal donations in a little while, but that is where you could go to avrant.com on the right-hand side. You can say support the podcast, and that would take you to PayPal if you'd like to give a donation that way. So big thanks to everybody for your financial support.
All right. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through... I don't even know what happened this week. I haven't been paying much attention. Yeah, lots of stuff. Lots of stuff. I'm sure there was something happening in Ukraine. There usually is.
I would imagine, yes.
Imagine that there's something happening there.
No kidding.
So that's not... From Matt, who loves having our podcast going during long drives. Matt, I'm sorry that your work from home has been ended. That's the only reason I can assume you're going on long drives on the regular, which kind of sucks. Sorry about that, Matt. Gurinder, Eric, who enjoyed my and Lee's off-the-cuff episode. He would welcome more episodes like that are just rants and discussion. Could make for a nice change of pace every once in a while. Okay. Bob, Joseph, Ryan, Tyler, who says he just discovered our podcast and he loves our practical advice. Mike, thanks. And Karl. Karl also liked the me and Lee, or Lee and I, whatever, recent episode and would enjoy additional non-question episodes from us in the future. That's fine. We can work on that.
I mean, if we ever run out of questions, that's what it's going to be. There have been actually fewer questions coming in as of late, so there's still been...
It's the end of the school year, the beginning of summer.
There was that, and last weekend was Mother's Day. I imagine some people spent some time on that, so yeah, but that's not out of the question, but I will say the names once more: Matt, Gurinder, Eric, Bob, Joseph, Ryan, Tyler, Mike, and Karl. Thank you all very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. They are appreciated, and a big thanks to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right, in the news, Marantz has added a new finish option for its Cinema 50 and Cinema 40 AV receiver models, a luxurious silver gold, which is not the best name.
Quite figure out why it's silver gold. It's not hyphenated. It's not got a slash. They just called it.
I thought there were silver
gold
and also gold, but that is clearly not the case.
That is not the case. It's a single finish option named.
Did they mean
silver
white gold? Is that what they meant?
Maybe.
Did they mean white gold? Because maybe it's a translation issue.
It could be. I mean, there is the gold marking of the logo, of the Marantz logo, but then
everything else on this bad boy is silver.
It's silver. It's silver. Yeah, white gold makes a lot more sense. Maybe it is a translation problem.
I don't know. Anyway, so the option is available exclusively through Marantz.com in the US and Canada. The price is the same as the standard black finish. I mean, this is like a throwback to a long time ago. Marantz made those gold receivers for a hot minute.
They did have, yeah.
And people were like losing their minds. Like, you either hated them or you loved them.
I think... What do we even call them now? Massimo? That's who owns them now, I guess. Anyway, I think they're exclusively holding on to the gold color finishes for the Class A products, which is a brand that they also own. So yeah, Marantz goes back to the silver or white gold or silver gold, as they want to call it.
So anyways, this makes total sense that they're only selling it through their own website because the production is going to be tiny for these. They're not going to bother making enough so that Amazon can have some.
Pleasantly surprised that they're like, hey, same price. They didn't upcharge for the finish option. So that's all right. That's great.
Yeah, you're just not going to be able to get whatever deal you can get buying it for the third party. Yeah. So this is, I mean, if I were buying a receiver and I wanted a Marantz, I would be looking for the white gold option here and not
silver gold.
The black one.
Silver gold.
I'm not calling it that because that's
not silver and gold. Silver gold.
Silver gold. Doesn't make sense.
All right.
Last week, Disney held an earnings call with CEO Bob Iger. He let it be known that they intend to combine Disney Plus and Hulu into a single app by the end of the calendar year, along with price increase to the ad-free tier, currently $11 per month, to better reflect the value of our content offerings. I mean, it's just like every place else in the world. So in other countries, Disney Plus includes Star, which offers most of Hulu exclusives and Fox and FX content. So while the naming is a little different, the overall experience should end up being quite similar to the U.S. customers. For the U.S. customers now, the exact price and date were not announced, and Comcast still owns 33% of Hulu, with the option for Disney to buy them out in 2024 for not less than $9 billion, or as Disney likes to call it, the change in our couch.
I mean, there's a little bit less in the coffers these days, you know. So
not that much less.
No.
The plan to combine Hulu with Disney Plus also came with the announcement that some content will be removed from the streaming service, but no specifics were given. All I care about is I get to drop one streaming service and pay
sort
less.
of. Yeah. Well, so you're paying for both of them separately.
Yes.
And you're hoping that the combined cost will be less, which we don't know for sure that it will be. It might end up being the same as when you just had them separately. They did make a mention that they intend to still allow people who want Hulu just by itself, no Disney Plus, to still get it separately. That way, Hulu enough. Only. But Disney Plus...
Not for long, they won't.
Right. Disney Plus will just have another banner at the top. You know how they've got the Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar as the tabs that they've got across the top. Well, Hulu is now going to be just another tab added to Disney Plus. There won't be an option to just keep the same Disney Plus plan price that you have now with no Hulu attached. Hulu is coming into Disney Plus. There's no choice in the matter. So that's the way it's going to be going forward, which, like I say, kind of brings everything more in parity with the rest of the world, because most of the rest of the countries have that Star, which is pretty much all the Hulu content. So there you go.
SignUp Captions, which if you put up signupcaptions.com, that's their website, reach out to us to let us know that they offer free American Sign Language and British Sign Language. I did not know there was an accent difference there. Is it?
I am certainly not familiar enough to know what differences there would be.
I have no idea. I had no idea. I always wondered about, and I know deaf people. I don't know why I didn't just ask them, but you know, I know you spell out words sometimes, you know, but I wondered if the rest of the symbols, you know, the sign symbols for certain things were universal across languages, or I always wondered that. So why don't I Google it? I never wonder it when I'm in front of a computer. That's why. Always wonder it when I'm driving or something. Anyways, they offer free American Sign Language and British Sign Language overlay options for over 70 plus titles on Disney Plus and Netflix at the moment. 70 titles on Disney Plus, not 70 plus. Where did that? I just scooted the plus all the way over there. Anyway, 70 titles on Disney Plus and Netflix at the moment, with more titles being added. They're available in the US and UK right now, which makes sense with the British thing, with plans to launch in Canada, Australia, India, and Pakistan next. The service works via a browser extension, so it isn't available through the native apps on smart TVs or streaming boxes at this time, but you can cast or mirror the streaming video after starting it in a web browser. I bet all the deaf people know about this, and we're just now.
I mean, I wouldn't count on everyone knowing about it, which is why I'm happy to mention it. Not that we have some kind of gigantic audience or anything like that, but I do know that we have other people who have their own YouTube channels, their own podcasts, who do listen to us, and, you know, get word spreading that. I think this is very, I mean, look, it's no cost, so what's the harm in trying? They say right on their website, they don't actually specify that it's nonprofit or volunteer or something. I'm not exactly sure how it's entirely funded, but they do say they do not collect data. That is not how they're making their money. They do not charge you. They do not collect data. It is somewhat limited in the fact that it's a browser extension, so you're not able to, add it to the app that you're using on your Apple TV Plus or built into your smart TV or something like that. But once you have that browser extension active, you get a little pop-up window. You can change the size, you can change the location of where that is, and if you do want to watch it on your big screen TV, well, you can do so via casting or mirroring. You would have one device, already open, playing it in the browser, and then you could cast it or mirror it and have that functionality. So there you go. I think that's well worth knowing about and adding it on as a browser extension, whatever you're using.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Reuters is reporting, with 3 sources confirming but declining to be named, that Samsung Electronics and LG Display have reached a deal for LG Display to supply 2 million 77-inch and 83-inch OLED panels to their largest rival next year, and 3 million to 5 million panels in 2025 and 2026, respectively. I saw this as Samsung admits defeat to LG or something like that. Is how the headline went. So
there's always a little bit of confusion because both Samsung and LG, within the overall parent companies that go by Samsung and LG, they have the 2 separate, they have more than just 2 divisions, but they have the 2 separate divisions, the manufacturing side that are Samsung Display and LG Display, and then the actual consumer electronics side, Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, and they actually have to internally purchase from that other wing. So LG makes televisions. LG Electronics makes televisions that LG Display does not manufacture the panels for. Right. Any of their LCD TVs, they're buying from somebody else. Same with Samsung. Mm-hmm. Samsung Electronics is purchasing all of their LCD displays from something other than Samsung Display. So, it's not really that weird for something like Samsung Electronics to purchase panels that are manufactured by LG Display.
It's like just both of them go into the same source, is all it is.
It could be, yeah. But historically, LG and Samsung have been the bitterest of rivals, including amongst their display manufacturing wings. So this is a little bit of news for them, Samsung Electronics, to actually say, you know what? If we want those big OLEDs at reasonable prices, we're going to go to basically our chief rival. It's about time. That's right.
And Samsung's own manufacturing division, the Samsung Display, no longer manufactures any LCD panels, and its QD OLED panels have so far proven to be expensive to produce and not yet profitable. Their main focus remains smaller OLED screens for portable devices. Meanwhile, LG Display has been running their 2 OLED factories below maximum capacity and taking a loss as a result. This deal will bring those factories up to maximum capacity, following the recent announcement that the new larger 10.5G whatever that means factory has been delayed. What's a half a generation? That's dumb.
I don't know.
Anyways,
generation is just the word.
Yeah, so they could make more, and Samsung said, well, if you can make more, could you make more for us? And LG said, sure, we can do that. And, this is how much it'll cost you. And they were like, well, that's cheaper than making it for ourselves.
It seems so.
It's just good business sense.
When the quantum dot OLEDs, the QD OLEDs, were coming out, all of the announcements around that were being made by Samsung Display. And there was actually all kinds of scuttlebutt behind the scenes that was being reported at places like Forbes and Reuters and things like that, where they were saying that largely Samsung Electronics was resisting purchasing Samsung Display's QD OLED panels, that they didn't really want to do OLED whatsoever, but that they were resistant to using Samsung Display's own QD OLED panels for these price and profitability margin type of reasons, and that largely Samsung Display was trying to sell their QD OLED panels to other manufacturers besides Samsung Electronics, which they have done with Sony, for example. But it's just interesting that these 2 wings of each of these companies and now finding this new deal for at least the larger sizes, which makes sense because Samsung Display is not making 83-inch QD OLED panels if they want to get into that size bracket, and the 77 inches are considerably more expensive than the 55 and 65. So they can bring those price points down, switch to the WOLED LG Display manufactured panels, and there we go, off and running.
Very exciting. Some comments here from listeners. Eric wanted to share some praise for the customer service he received from both BenQ and Klipsch. First is BenQ TX850 projector developed
TK.
TK. TX, whatever. Developed a dead pixel. He submitted an online service request, and they called him back the next day. He inquired if he could actually trade up by sending in his projector and paying the difference to get back a higher-end model. They weren't able to do that. They did send him a shipping label, and they had his TK 850 back to him without the X anymore, which is weird.
Right.
Within 4 business days, all fixed and looking great. He's very happy with that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Then, with Klipsch, she has one of their Cinema 600 sound bars that was on the fritz with what seemed to be a problem with its power supply. He called Klipsch's customer service line. They immediately sent him a brand new replacement, telling him to ship back his faulty unit in the box that the replacement would be coming in. Quick and easy. He's very pleased with that service, too. Tells you how much it costs to make those sound bars. That tells you. Because there's like an 80% chance people aren't going to send it back anyway. So they're like,
there could be that. I mean, that was the way Xbox was doing things too in the 360 Red Ring of Death days. They're just like, people were always joking, right? They're like, yeah, send me the coffin. Send me the coffin for me to send this back to you. So, but I mean, hey, as Eric pointed out in his email, he's like, yeah, you often hear about the horror stories about customer service. It is very nice when companies stand up behind their products, do what's right, make it easy for their customers, don't make it some kind of giant hassle. So BenQ and Klipsch, you get thumbs up, at least from Eric, thumbs up from us too for hearing about that. So that is good to hear.
I will say that I've got the SVS customer service line open on my computer for a while so that I could call them when I was ready to deal with this, because that I am noticing that and it may have been from the very beginning that I was hearing those noises and just assumed that they were part of my room, and I wasn't going to bother tracking them down because they didn't happen very often. But now that I can recreate them, like this is my thing. If I can't recreate a problem,
right,
I don't complain about it until I can figure out what it is. That happens with my bike too. Like when I first got my newest bike, I was hearing creaks, but I couldn't make it happen all the time. And once I started figuring out how to make it happen, I took it in the shop and I showed them. They went, "Oh yeah, we can fix that." Boom, and it was out in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But if you just come in with like, I don't know, it's making a noise, you could be in for hundreds of dollars extra of them diagnosing.
Yeah.
That's now that I know that there's an issue here, I'm going to now contact SVS, and I should just send an email, but I kind of don't want to bother.
They'll survive.
The people that know me over there. I don't want to like name drop. I just want to like.
You don't have to. They are happy to help out. Oh my goodness.
So, anyways, Andrew and Max both wanted to comment that the old MyHarmony desktop software still works for the old infrared only Harmony remote models that never switched over to using the newer desktop Harmony software or the smartphone app. So at least there's that. So there you go.
Yeah, because we have been saying, or at least I have been saying, words out of my mouth that the desktop Harmony software is kaput, not working anymore. They just wanted the clarification that don't worry if you've got one of the older models, the infrared-only models, the non-hub, non-internet connected Wi-Fi models, that only worked with that older version of the MyHarmony desktop software, that does still work. You can still make your changes in there, and that still functions. So there you go.
Yeah, I have both of those Harmony apps on my computer, which is annoying. Infinite Gary decided to go ahead and import a Panasonic LZ2000 OLED TV since, according to Vincent Teo from the HEV test, it has the very best just above black performance of any OLED, slightly besting the Sony and LG models that are available in North America. Gary ordered the 55-inch model, got a kick out of the 65-pound box coming over on a pallet all by itself with a total shipping weight of 166 pounds. So whatever. Should hopefully mean it's well protected for its journey. Well, we will see.
Let us hope. Yeah, I once upon a time, many years ago, shipped Gary my Kuro Pioneer Kuro plasma monitor. It wasn't even a TV, it was a monitor. It didn't have any speakers built into it. And it did not survive its journey. Despite having been professionally packed and shipped, it didn't make it. Those were fragile TVs. Shouldn't really be a problem with an OLED. Those are pretty darn durable, to be honest, because they're flexible. It's kind of hard to damage the screens on OLEDs, but nonetheless, hopefully that does make its journey across the Atlantic to you safely, Gary.
Okay. Good for you, Gary. Noah couldn't help but laugh when he came across the Audiocrast spring speaker.
And that is not a typo. It is Crast.
Crast. Because
they didn't want to get sued by Google, I guess.
Spring speaker isolation fee. He figured we went to see them. $24 for a pack of 4. They are exactly what you think they are. They are a foot on the ground, a foot above it, and in between 4 springs.
I think there's
Or
actually
5.
more than what do we got?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
3, 4, 7 actually. There you go. Yeah,
7.
Yeah.
Oh,
when they're separated, they got 6 on the bottom, 1 on the top, so that they align. Yeah, 7 springs. There you go. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason why this couldn't function. This should be perfectly functional.
The question with springs is that you need them to compress somewhat, but not too much.
Right. That's right.
Whereas a squishy membrane in between, it will squish no matter. It will not be so hard as to not absorb the vibrations as it goes through. Whereas the springs could be so strong as to not.
That's right.
And I love how looks like they have it on the
under the foot of an AV receiver.
It looks like an AV receiver, or maybe something like that, which
amplifier
clearly would not be heavy enough to. And if they compress too much, then they're completely useless.
Yeah. So I mean, these will have a weight range, right?
Yes.
It has to be heavy enough that the spring tension is not so strong that it's essentially a solid connection, and not so heavy that it would fully compress the spring. So there will be a weight range on these. But other than that, I mean, just like in concept, there's no reason why this couldn't function for within that weight range. I do kind of question the stability of putting something like, an amplifier that already has feet, or say a speaker with spikes, because I could see how this could become unlevel fairly easily, kind of twist and rotate and a little squishier down to one side than the other, and you end up on a tilt. That seems like fairly easy, but given how many springs are there, I guess that evens it out a little bit. So I don't know. I don't necessarily think this would be the very best choice for decoupling or damping below my speakers or audio components, but I'm not necessarily going to completely laugh at it because, like I say, no reason
I think it absolutely can
function.
work. There's no reason why,
and they're
it can't
not expensive. So
no, I think I just think that they're pointlessly. I mean, I don't understand why the springs are better than any. Like,
indeed,
literally all the rest of the possible solutions to this problem. Like,
most pads are still cheaper than this.
Yes, these are. All right, questions. Let's get into it. Adam asked about wanting to use all 3 HDMI outputs on his AV receiver to occasionally send the same signal to 3 different TVs spread out throughout his basement. 2 of those TVs are far away. So he said an Ethernet solution could work as long as he isn't going beyond HDMI 2.0. Mm-hmm. But we'd probably just run ultra-high-speed fiber optic HDMI cables inside a conduit at this point. He wanted to ask, is there a wireless HDMI solution that might work? It would be easiest of all to install and upgrade in the future if necessary. No.
Not anything that we would recommend and feel good about recommending
I have
to you,
seen HDMI wireless solutions almost since HDMI became a thing. Like they came out with it immediately, and they never have materialized in the real world in any sort of meaningful way that you would want. The best that you could ever have hoped for an HDMI wireless solution was to get it from your equipment rack to your projector, which was like in the same room.
Yeah,
like,
they
with line of sight.
Honestly, do need line of sight. Yeah, I mean, what he was talking about having
through
this
walls and everything else.
Yeah, spread across your basement. I just have no confidence in any of the wireless HDMI solutions I'm aware of that they would reliably make it through 1, let alone 2 or more walls or doors or anything like that.
I wouldn't even put them 30 feet away in the same room. I think it's too far.
Yeah, well, because once you get that and you do have clear line of sight, can you honestly not run some sort of cable at that point? So yeah, it gets really tough for me to feel good about recommending any wireless HDMI. I mean, just at this year's CES, I guess it was, LG was showing off their own proprietary wireless connection that went between a box where you plug in all your sources to one of their OLED TVs. It was their own proprietary solution. Now, in that case, it was the very first example of one that could do HDMI 2.1 bandwidth, 40 gigabits per second. Any of the wireless HDMI solutions you could buy right now would at most claim to do 18 gigabits per second, which again, no different from the Ethernet solutions that we were talking about. And he said that's fine. He is only going up to 4K HDMI 60 maximum with his plans. So it's not that there aren't any that wouldn't on the spec sheet say and make the claim that they could work. But yeah, we just know from any of the demos we've seen, it's like it just doesn't reliably work 100% of the time, whereas a physical cable, something's got to go pretty darn wrong, otherwise it works. The issue here, if you're saying, well, why? Like you can have a Wi-Fi connection and send ultra high definition video around via your Wi-Fi network, and that can function. Why can't we have a wireless HDMI solution? It's because once it becomes an HDMI signal, there's no error correction. It's not packetized anymore. It is just a fire hose of bits with no error correction applied to it. So if some bits drop, you get sparklies at best and just full-on video dropouts at worst, or intermittent signal, and it's just not a reliable experience. So that's where we are with that. I wish I had a happier answer, but I just don't feel good about pointing you to any wireless HDMI solution.
Yeah. Unfortunately, if everybody had gotten vaccinated, then we would all have 5G and then it would work.
Oh, yeah, because 5G's turned out to be such a fantastic thing, at least in North America, right?
I literally turned it off on my phone immediately because all it does
is drains your battery.
It just kills my battery, man. Kills your battery. I'm like, I don't need this. I don't need to scroll through the doom scroll through Facebook any faster than I currently am. This is not helping me whatsoever.
I mean, it is bad because we are so North American centric that this isn't the case throughout the rest of the world. Like the rest of the world is doing 5G pretty all right. It's us. We're the problem. I mean, Canada, too, for sure. We have even less 5G coverage in Canada, and what we have is just as spotty as the U.S. is. So it's not great. It's not great.
North America is the problem. I know.
Pity us,
right?
Europe. Pity us, Asia.
It's probably the first time anybody's ever said that, Rob. North America is the problem.
Oh,
I think that might be the first. You might have just coined a new phrase.
All right.
Joseph in Australia, where it's not the problem. Not the problem. Joseph really appreciated our explanation about high sensitivity speakers and our recommendations for which models to consider for his very large home cinema, where he's sitting just over 20 feet away. He looked into the JTR speakers that we recommended with great interest, but as we suspected, shipping them to Australia is prohibitively expensive. Dude, living in Australia is prohibitively expensive. Don't come at me with this noise, dude.
No.
It costs too much to live there. It costs more to ship each speaker than the purchase price. That is par for the course with Australia. I mean, they send everything there by hump. I live there. You can't you can't tell me something I don't know. I used to try to order things from Amazon and just be like, "Are you joking?" Like it's like you had to ship it all the way from China or Japan or wherever it came from, all the way to North America, where there's a problem there, as we've discussed, and then back to Australia. That's the shipping you were paying.
Yeah.
And while his budget is high, the price of the JBL Synthesis or Studio monitor speakers that we suggested is also prohibitively high in Australia. Well, it sounds like someone needs to up their budget. So being an Australian brand...
I mean, given what he's already willing to pay,
I don't know what he's willing to pay. I don't remember any of this. The choice that seems to make the most sense to his situation is Krix, which I have reviewed one pair of, and from that one pair of speakers, my entire opinion of Krix's was formed and will never be changed. It's immutable.
I mean, that is pretty common among audiophiles, as we talked about last week.
I heard one pair of Krix.
That's right.
Didn't really like them, and that was the end of that. They're Megaphonics. See, I don't even like how they spell this stupid word. Okay, yeah. Megaphonics, Phonix.
Of course,
because Krix is Rix.
Yes,
see how that goes?
Correct.
Yes, it's got the thing. Shut
Synergy.
up. Their Megaphonics flat center would physically fit very nicely into setup, and their Pix, Pix. See what you did there? Hate this brand. Left.
Oh no! Oh no! Now he's gonna feel bad. That's terrible.
I'm sorry. The naming. Just stop it. Don't put. Next thing I know, they're gonna have a lowercase I in front of something. Picks left and right would work well with these in those positions to rate at 97 dB and 96 dB sensitivity, respectively, which seems to be right in line with what we said he needs. What do we think about going with these choices? I don't know. Let me look at them real quick. Okay, that's a horn-loaded one.
Very horn-loaded.
These are. Oh my God, that's very horn-loaded. I mean, they look a lot like just glancing at them, they look a lot like what you would expect movie theater style speakers to look like.
Professional small movie theater
ugly
speakers.
and with big massive horns on them.
Yep.
So I mean, they could probably work. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely appropriate in terms of the specs for the type of output and power handling and sensitivity that you need. Absolutely fits the bill in terms of that. Like you say, they are an Australian brand. They're available locally. The price, therefore, is much more reasonable.
I like how they have the available finish black. That's I mean, why'd you even put that there? You don't need to put that there. They're already shown in black. They're like, just in case you're wondering,
it's a shock. They don't have silver gold, Tom. They do not.
Where's
have
the silver gold?
That's right. No, these come in black, and it looks like a pretty darn flat black at that. You're not purchasing these particular speakers from Krix for their beauty and aesthetics. These are meant to blend in and disappear once the lights are off, and that is precisely what they will do. So I mean, some certainly. I don't know. Have I heard any Krix speakers? I don't think I can form any opinion. What were the ones? I don't think these were the ones that you heard, right,
God,
Tom?
No. I'm sure the speakers that I heard don't exist anymore.
Okay. So, I mean, what was your opinion of the sound of the ones that you heard, at least, just for some inkling of the brand in general? Like you say, they weren't your favorite, but what was it?
I would have to go back and look at my review. My biggest problem with them was that, oh my God, why is it showing me that? Was that their tweeter was exceedingly low. And it was so low that I was...
Now, you're talking physically.
Physically low.
Okay.
Yeah, like
not sound output, just physically it was low. Okay. So I mean, that's not necessarily going to be an issue when he's doing more of a custom install type of job. He can get the tweeters positioned properly in his case. So that I wouldn't necessarily pick as a criticism. But in terms of the sound, I mean, as I recall you recounting that review, it was just that, I mean, one of the things to know about Tom and Rob is that we strongly favor very neutral speakers for the primary reason that we just want to be able to say, hey, you take these neutral, tell it like it is speakers, put them in essentially any room, doesn't mean they're going to be your favorite for whatever type of music you listen to, for whatever type of setting you have, for whatever your seating arrangement might be. Might not be your favorite speakers, but we feel confident as people trying to give advice on the internet to a wide range of people that at least the speakers are not inherently the problem if they are neutral, tell it like it is speakers. They're outputting what the signal said to do. We feel pretty confident about the speakers that we like to recommend in them being able to do that, and therefore we feel good about saying, okay, if you don't like them, at least these are speakers that you can EQ to have whatever frequency response you do prefer because they tell it like it is and respond to the signal in a predictable way. So, I mean, my recollection of Krix was that they have some characteristic sound to them, which is not unlike, say, Klipsch or B&W or Golden Ear, all of which are speakers that we know are very well liked by a lot of people that honestly we completely respect, have no real beef whatsoever. If someone says, hey, I listen to the speakers, I like the Golden Ears the best, we're like, great, we have no problem with that whatsoever. But it's just that those types of speakers, well respected, well liked, but tend to have a bit of their own characteristic sound to them, aren't ruler flat frequency response, don't necessarily send out the signal exactly the way that it came in. Krix seemed to fall into that camp too. They have a Krix sound, something that's a little bit identifiable as a characteristic or colored sound to them. So as far as I know, that was basically the sort of criticism that we might level at them, but it's very important to know that that's from our perspective of very much favoring very neutral speakers.
So I reviewed the Phoenix, which is they now have a Phoenix Mark II. And my impression was like they had like a according to the review, because I obviously don't remember this, other than the tweeter being too low, which forced me to get the best sound out of them, I had to sit on the ground. Okay. That's literally it.
Or find a way to physically raise the speakers.
Right, which at the time I wasn't willing to do or capable of doing, or thought I should have to do in order to do it. Like when I do a review, I'm not going to like modify my entire room just for your speakers. I should be able to put your speakers on the ground as intended and listen to them, and that's what you get. they also, like Rob said, they have a characteristic sound, and I found that at higher volumes with those particular speakers, they got bright on the top end and boomy on the bottom end, and then the mid-range tended to get kind of lost and all that. But there was like a sweet spot on the volume dial for me in my room with those particular speakers, which they no longer sell.
And the notion that speakers with this sort of design might have some bit of a smiley face curve to them would not be shocking. I mean, Klipsch,
a lot of speakers have a smiley face design.
Similarly, Klipsch, and the design is not worlds apart from there. So, it wouldn't be a super shock for that. What I would say about all of this, though, where I actually have no real problem with this, because I definitely agree. Yes, the price and availability makes sense. The specs definitely make sense. I have no problems there. And where I want to set Joseph's mind at ease and ultimately come down on the side of, I am going to give a thumbs up to going ahead with this speaker choice, is that he's got Trinov processing and amplification powering these things. You have one of the most capable room correction and EQ systems at your disposal. He has a professional Trinov installer who is working on this system with him. If you put this in with a flat EQ or no EQ applied and say, there's something about this sound that isn't quite, or you play a sweep and go, there's something about this sound that isn't quite neutral, or I just don't prefer it this way. You have at your disposal such a powerful and capable EQ system that you can basically make the frequency response of these speakers whatever you want. I mean, you've got the headroom in all directions that you can tamp down if something is a little overly bright or a little overly bloated in the mid bass or something like that. You can easily pare that down with some EQ and get the frequency response that pleases you most. So I mean, the Krix speakers are not going to be so inaccurate that it is impossible to EQ them with something as powerful as Trinov. It's nothing close to that. It's purely coming from our, leaning towards just wanting the most. I mean, that's why I favored the JBL synthesis. Those measure ruler flat. They tell it exactly like it is, and therefore I feel very confident saying, yeah, you put those, if you don't like the sound, you can EQ it to whatever you want it to be. But I don't have a problem in this scenario with Krix. I think they check all the boxes that are really, really important in this scenario, and we know you have such powerful processing in EQ that if you want to tailor the sound a little bit, you can easily do that with what you have. So I will give this a thumbs up. I think you're making a very reasonable decision, and I have no problem with you going with these Krix speakers.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree. I don't think that's that you should have much of a problem. I think in my case in that review, I ended up they included port plugs, and that sort of helped the bass issue quite a bit. And like Rob said, you can probably EQ them fairly flat. They didn't seem to be completely off, and when they were in that sweet spot volume wise for during my review. And I was even using external amplification at that point. I had the Emotiva amp that I had them plugged into. They sounded very good overall. So there's no reason to think that they can't sound very good like all the time. So I would say that they are at least worth a demo, if nothing else.
Absolutely. Yeah. These are certainly nothing I would say, just avoid them on site. Nothing like that. And to put it in perspective, we would have said very similar things if you had gone, say, Klipsch Professional.
Yes.
It would have been a very similar scenario. Again, the specs are exactly the type of sensitivity that you need if the price point fit and the availability was there. But because we know those Klipsch consumer and professional speakers have a bit of that characteristic Klipsch sound, we would have said very, very similar things. So if that helps you get your mind around it and feel more at ease, then I say definitely go ahead, give those Krix speakers a try. They make a lot of sense for you.
And until Krix stops naming their speakers so stupidly, I'm going to continue to hate them. Okay, that's just it. I'm sorry. It's not my fault. Blame them. He says 2 of the amplifier channels on this Trinov Amplitude aren't connected to anything at the moment. We're wasting our money. It's like throwing money away, Rob. It's just lighting it on fire and throwing it in the garbage can and burning down your entire house.
There are some pre-ins and some speaker binding posts with no wires connected to them.
Oh, clearly.
They're idle. They're not doing anything.
This is, I think, in the Church of Latter-day Audiophiles, you are excommunicated, sir.
Could be.
Each channel is rated to deliver 200 watts continuous with up to 400 watts peaks. The Krix speakers are rated to 500 watts RMS maximum. The turn-off amp can be bridged to deliver more power, up to 800 watts into 8 ohm load. Would it be helpful at all to bridge those two unused channels? Would it matter that the bridged wattage rating would exceed the maximum wattage of the speakers? And how is it that each individual amplifier channel is rated to deliver 200 watts into 8 ohms, but when two channels are bridged together, they're rated to deliver up to 800 watts into 8 ohms? First of all, too much power is never an issue.
That's right. If you
too little power is an issue. Too much power is not an issue. The speakers aren't going to say. I mean, you're not pushing power to the speakers.
Yeah,
so
power does not get forced into them by the amplifier. That is not the way it works. We have been corrected. We don't want to do the flip side and say that power is drawn or sucked by the speakers, because
I'm going to say it just to piss that dude off.
Sure. But what we have is a difference in potential, right? That's what's actually going across that speaker load, a difference in potential. If you sort of maybe envision like a trough of water that you are tilting, tilt it, raise the left side, drop the right side, raise the right side, drop the left side, and when you increase the wattage, that is like you have a steeper tilt and more water flowing, but it still doesn't get like pushed through the speaker. The amount of wattage that actually goes through the speaker is based on, okay, how steep is that tilt, right? That's like the difference in potential, the voltage force, if you want to think of it that way. That's what's there, but how much water actually gets through the speaker, if you think of the flow of electron currents that way, how much gets through that just depends on the impedance of the speaker and how much is able to go through based upon that voltage, that difference in potential across the circuit. So having more wattage available to use is not going to be any sort of problem. You're not going to blow up the speaker just because there are more watts available. But what I would say in your case, the reason that I recommended that you look for speakers that are 95 dB efficient or higher, and you've met that with the Krix speaker models that you're looking at, was because I knew you had 200 watts per channel for 100 watts peak, 200 watts continuous. I knew that you had that, and the math says when that is the amplifier you have, and you have 95 dB sensitive or more speakers, for the distances that you were talking about in your room, you're done. And having more wattage available, it's not going to hurt anything. If you just want to do it, it's not like it's going to hurt, but you won't actually really ever need the potential 800 watts. Why do they list it as 200 watts continuous into a single channel, up to 800 watts when bridged? Well, those are two different things. One of them is the continuous spec, going all day long. The other is a peak spec. And when you look at each individual channel can deliver up to 400 watts peak, well, now the math makes perfect sense. Yeah, we bridge two of them together, you can get up to 800 watts. Why do they fudge the numbers a little bit? Well, it's because if they listed the bridged continuous wattage, keeping the same distortion figures into the same impedance load, because this thing is not 100% efficient, the continuous rating would be something like 360 watts, and they just don't want you to see the number go down. You're like, I put two of these together, it's supposed to be 200 watts per channel, why isn't it 400 watts continuous? Well, if they kept all the other parameters the same, because it isn't 100% efficient, it would be a little lower. Maybe it'll be 370, 380, 350 watts. Oh, heaven forbid. So they just fudge that on the spec sheet a little bit, because peak-wise, where they aren't really caring too much about the other parameters, they're just like, how much wattage come out of this thing for an instantaneous peak? Well, that just flat out doubles from 400 to 800, so it looks better on the spec sheet. So that's a little bit of marketing at play there, honestly. That's what's going. It's not a lie, but there's a little bit of marketing fudging going on, so don't have to worry too much about that. So none of it is a concern. I will just say you don't need to do it. Mathematically, we got you where you needed to be with the sensitivity of your speakers. With one of those amplifier channels delivering 200 watts continuous, you don't need any more. But if you just decide you want to do it, it's not going to do any harm. It's not going to force all 800 watts into your 500 watt maximum speaker. So you're perfectly fine no matter what you do, honestly.
He's going to do it anyways. He's going to do it.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that. Go for it. Then you're going to decide, wait, what about my center? My center isn't also bi-amp.
No.
You'll have to get a monoblock to add.
Will someone please think about the center channels?
That's right.
Being bi-amped for no reason. We're not bi-amped, bridged or whatever. Bob used a bunch of Echo Dots and then older AV receivers and older AV receivers that he still had on hand to create a whole house audio system. Most of the time it works really well thanks to the improved echo-to-echo communication that's been upgraded over the years. His one problem is that he has to leave those AV receivers powered on all the time, which does produce a significant amount of heat and power just going to waste. They don't really suck that much power out. But let's go. Is there a way?
It is more than when they're in standby. That's unquestionable. No.
Is there a way to add something to make the AV receivers do auto sensing, like when an audio signal is sent from the Echo Dot, the AV receiver will automatically power up? Or alternatively, is there an inexpensive amp choice that would give him the auto on capability he's looking for? I don't know.
Tom's squinching up his face.
I was thinking, it just come off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of, because usually you use a 12-volt trigger to do this, but the Echo Dots are not going to have a 12-volt trigger.
And the 12-volt trigger typically comes out of the AV receiver to turn on, say, an external amplifier or drop a projection screen.
So you're looking for like
the other way.
An auto sensing on.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that for your AV receiver. I mean, what I could say is, as long as all of these what were basically spare AV receivers, they weren't being used in other systems, so we used it for whole house audio. As long as they are new enough that they have an app, then it wouldn't be auto sensing, but it would just give you a way to remotely turn them on and off that isn't reliant on an infrared remote or being physically in the room. If they have an app, then via your network, you could pull out your smartphone, use the AV receiver's app to turn it on and off. But that wouldn't be auto sensing. That's not as simple as talking to your Echo Dot and having it just automatically turn on. I suppose there's the world where, let's see, you could do Fire TV cubes, which have infrared emitters on them and can basically be used as universal remotes. Yeah. And you could do some automation programming so that when you tell your Echo Dot to play music, it will then send out an infrared command. So as long as it's within line of sight of the AV receiver that's powering that signal, you could do this with Amazon Fire TV cubes, which would, be an outlay of cost for that, but at least it wouldn't require you to replace all the AV receivers. So those are a couple of ways that you could do it without changing any hardware other than maybe replacing your dots with Amazon Fire TV cubes instead, because those have the voice assistant built into them and can still output the signal, which would work with your AV receivers because it would be an HDMI signal coming out of the Amazon Fire TV cubes, and then they have IR emitters built into them that could send remote commands. So the other, in my opinion, probably simpler way to do this would be to get distribution amplifiers that have this functionality built into them. If you just want to do this 2 channels at a time, and you don't want all of the channels that you need built into a single chassis, if you want them in separate rooms, Audio Source's Amp 100, which goes for $140. It's a stereo amplifier. It's a 2-channel amplifier. That has your standard auto sensing, right? So you just have the signal that's coming out of the Echo Dots, and when it detects that audio signal is present, it comes out of standby and powers, and then after, I think it's 15 minutes, automatically powers itself down once it doesn't sense a signal anymore. So it does exactly what you talked about for a pretty reasonable price. $140 for a stereo amp isn't too bad at all. That's 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms with that one. Or if you're like, yeah, I have several speakers, I don't mind having all of the amplification built into a single chassis, then Dayton Audio has some good solutions. They have their MA1240 and their MA1260. The 40 does represent 40 watts per channel into 8 ohms. The 60 does represent 60 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And the 12 is 12 channels of amplification. Right. So 6 stereo zones with either of those. It's $630 for the 1240. It's $735 for the 1260. You go, okay, that's not inexpensive, but when you consider that's actually less per channel than the $70 per channel of the stereo audio source. So if you're just dividing it down into how much am I paying per channel, even the 60 watt per channel 1260, which is actually 10 watts more than that audio source, is less per channel at $735 divided by 12. So there you go. They're certainly reasonable there, and those have auto sensing, exactly what you're talking about. So to me, that's probably the simpler solution, but you've got the price associated with it.
More expensive.
Yeah.
He asked, could you use a subwoofer plate amp to power some of these whole house audio speakers. He knows for sure you could have auto on sensing that way, and he was wondering if you could also use the crossovers that's built in the subwoofer plate amp to actually roll off the deep bass and protect the speakers from bottoming out. So subwoofer amps, first of all, that the crossover is the wrong direction. That's not going to work. You'd actually
it would be rolling off the high
highs.
frequencies and only powering the deep bass, which makes sense because it was intended to power a subwoofer. Yeah.
And the subwoofer plate amps in particular are optimized for those low frequencies. And while they could certainly theoretically power the entire frequency range, assume that they would not be linear. I think that would be
they
a
often become
fair
non-linear in the high frequencies.
Yeah. So the other options that Rob has given you is better than this because honestly, it won't do what you want, and I don't think it'll be linear.
Yeah, the prices per channel don't really change. I mean, also keep in mind, if you went subwoofer plate amp, that's a single amplifier channel. You need 2 of them just for a stereo pair.
Right.
So I think if you look at it that way, suddenly the price does not become any sort of advantage going with subwoofer plate amps. Not when you have the Dayton distribution amp or the audio source stereo amp as alternatives. So I think something out of that realm of suggestions is going to get this job done for you for simplicity's sake. If everything is going to one central, closet location type of thing, I think one of those Dayton distribution amps makes the most sense here. But yeah, I kind of am curious what the Amazon Fire TV Cube situation would be, but I think that's maybe more hassle and work than it's honestly worth. And there's cost associated with that too.
The distribution app makes the most sense to me.
I think so.
Ryan just put together a whole new home theater setup, Epson 5050 UB projector on a 120-inch silver ticket screen, Onkyo RZ50 receiver, Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, NVIDIA Shield Pro. It's a short question, but not necessarily a short answer. Where can we point him to getting the best settings for all of his devices? So, yes, I wrote, because all the different devices are going to be in different places, but I see that Rob's got a bunch of recommendations here. So rather than me just kind of doing it from the hip, let's just let Rob do his thing.
Sure. I mean, I certainly didn't want to literally go through all the settings because this is a very specific to just to this listener. So, I mean, he asked for resources. So I will just say when it comes to getting picture settings for projectors, I do very much like what projectorreviews.com offers, at least for the projector models that they have reviewed. Projector Central is good too, but I tend to find that Projector Reviews just gets a little bit more in depth. They go into some of the nitty-grittier type of settings in their reviews. So they certainly have one for the Epson 5050 UB, a tremendously popular projector. So they've got a really good one there. They offer in their review of the 5050 UB settings for SDR content, which is slightly confusingly labeled because they say it's for 1080p or Rec 709. Well, that applies to anything that is standard dynamic range. I'm not exactly sure why they labeled it 1080p and Rec 709, but those would be great settings to use for anything standard dynamic range. Then they give you 2 options when it comes to HDR. One that is technically the most accurate, including having full wide color out to DCI-P3, and a second that is just the brightest HDR you could get, but not necessarily the most accurate color or necessarily the most accurate EOTF training. I would personally, from experience with the 5050 UB, recommend using the ones that they say for the brightest settings. For me, when it comes to HDR, the number of times you're actually going to notice that the color could have been wider in the gamut is nil. You're never going to actually notice that shade of red could have been deeper. It's just not a thing that your eye is going to notice, whereas sheer brightness you're gonna notice, and that is where HDR is gonna make itself stand out.
Says
when
Rob,
those highlights...
who just watched a movie where he couldn't see anything in the dark.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the other end of the scale there. But I mean, when it comes to those highlights, yeah, you want them to pop. That's the point of high dynamic range. So I would do that. What you end up there is with the projector set to its natural picture mode. The picture mode names, one of them is natural. And you're going to end up set it there for both standard dynamic range and high dynamic range. That's my recommendation, is leave it in the natural picture mode setting all the time. That gives you the convenience as well of just not having to change picture modes when the signal changes. One thing to note, though, is the lamp mode will remain the same if the picture mode remains the same. The lamp mode is a separate setting, and very often people will want to use, say, the low lamp mode for standard dynamic range, but the high lamp mode for high dynamic range if you want as much pop and specular highlights as you can get out of the projector. So a trick there is there are 10 slots for memories of picture modes that you can save in the Epson and call up with a single button press. You press the button once, it shows up on your screen, the list of all the 10 memory save slots, and you can just go to the one that you want and press OK. And it changes. So you can save SDR separate from HDR in those memory slots, and it makes switching between things, including the lamp mode, when you do it in the manual memory slots, make that very easy. So that would be my recommendation there, and not worry too much about, I'm not getting all the wide color. Don't worry about it. I'd rather have the brightness. For the Onkyo, I will simply say I'm going to point you to a video where they discuss the hidden menus that aren't mentioned in the manual, and some of them are useful. Otherwise, go through a little bit tediously just all the menu options. They aren't really that bad. There isn't much you need to change in the Onkyo, but they have some hidden menus not mentioned in the manual. I'll have the link to the person who describes how to get to all of those. Just a YouTube video that goes through that. And there is some useful stuff in there, particularly when it comes to, say, interlaced versus progressive, how the AV receiver handles that, setting things between the HDMI. Like if you're having a 3D issue, the hidden menu to get from enhanced HDMI signals to standard HDMI signals is not just in the regular user menu, and it's not mentioned in the manuals. So have a link to how to get to that. For the Panasonic player, I'll link you up to Vincentio's talks about their HDR optimizer, and what he actually reviewed was the UB9000. So it's got a couple of settings that your UB820 doesn't have, but otherwise everything else applies. Then for the Shield, I haven't found a single video that's a reasonable length I can point you to where I say, that person got everything right, in my opinion. So I will just say for there, since this is a projector setup, and this would be my recommendation anyway, set it to the HDR10 available in 10-bit and Rec 2020 as the default. That would be my recommendation for the outgoing picture settings from your Shield. Do not turn on match content color, which seems like an enticing thing to do. It just is nothing but headaches, and it's unnecessary. The Shield doesn't have a problem putting everything into one type of container and keeping it accurate and consistent. If you turn on the match content color, you're in for a world of hurt, so it sounds enticing, but don't do it. I think that's about it. The only other thing is if you want to unlock the developer mode, because it is Android running on that Shield TV, you go into the device preferences, highlight where it says About, and then just click the OK button a gazillion times, and eventually it'll tell you developer mode has been unlocked, and then there's a few settings in there that you can go through. That's it. Tom's doing something on his phone, so I guess I'll read the next
my wife is texting me. That's okay. Gotcha. I'm dealing with it. Sorry for those of you that had to watch me looking down with my weird whatever. I'm sure I had like 45 chins at that point, so whatever. The recommendation for the Epson 5050 UB picture setting posted by Projector Review said they use the natural picture mode for 1080p in Rec 709 and the digital cinema picture mode for the very best 4K with HDR calibration. But then they also suggest that you can use the natural picture mode again for the brightest 4K with HDR calibration. If he sticks with the natural picture mode all of the time for everything, should he adjust the settings to what they've listed for the 1080p and Rec 709 values, or should he adjust the settings to what's listed for the brightest 4K and HDR values? Can he do both and somehow easily switch between the two sets of values, or will the projector just automatically switch between SDR and HDR values on its own? I will tell you that if this were me, I would of course try both and then see which one I like best. But I would end up sticking with one because I am far too lazy to keep switching back and forth. And I would probably go with the 4K HDR one. Yeah, by default.
I mean, in a way, you don't have to choose, because when it's a standard dynamic range signal coming into the projector, it has those settings values that you set during an SDR signal.
Right. Okay, that
and
makes
then
sense.
when HDR comes in, even though many of the settings appear the same, you can set a different value for HDR and it will automatically switch between them. But as I mentioned when I was talking about what I would recommend, the lamp mode will not change automatically. So for that reason, I would just use those manual memory settings if you decide that you want to change lamp modes when you're going between SDR and HDR. You have those 10 slots for memory picture presets that you save. One button on the row brings up the list, and then you just highlight and click OK to switch very quickly between all of those picture settings. So either way, you've got a solution that's going to work. There is a quick and easy way to switch, so you can have two of them stored completely separately in your two memory slots if you want to do it that way, so that you can change the lamp mode at the same time. Or if you're keeping the lamp mode consistent, you can just let it do it automatically. It'll use the SDR values that you set when it was receiving an SDR signal. It'll use the HDR values that you set when it was receiving an HDR signal. So you will need to set them twice. It's not that it's going to automatically translate for you. You will need to set them twice, but once they're set, it will detect and switch between SDR versus HDR.
Yes. Very exciting. Mike is constructing a seating riser. It'll be 8 inches tall, about 10 feet wide, and 5 feet front to back. Naturally, seeing the advice online to use the riser as a base trap. Please, for the love of God, don't do this.
Well, there you go. There's a hint, a spoiler warning.
But the advice on how to go about doing that is all over the place. He's seen suggestions for Swiss cheese style holes drilled into the top and the sides. He's seen plans for specific hole or slot sizes to tune the riser, which seems a bit silly to him. Is it honestly worth doing any of this? And if so, what's the proper method? So the idea here is that you put holes in it so that air can flow through it, and then you fill it full of insulation, and then it will be a base trap.
Yeah,
and
the idea is you've added a hollow thing to your room.
Yeah.
Let's use the hollow thing as an acoustic treatment. Not an unreasonable idea in theory when you think of it that way.
The problem is that you've now taken that hollow thing and turned it into a little bit of a drum. And while you may not hear it, you will be sitting on it, and you will almost certainly feel it. And that's where I draw the line.
It's a non-linear drum at that. It doesn't respond the same to all frequencies. Some frequencies make that riser shake like crazy. Other frequencies don't move it at all, and you are now physically sitting on a non-linear drum. Both Tom and I hate the experience of making a riser that can move in sympathy with the sound waves. Both of us agree that we want, if possible, an inert riser. Now, that makes you say, okay, I've added this hollow thing to my room. It feels like kind of a waste to maybe not use it as a bass trap. I wish I could tell you there was a way that worked really well, but the only, when it comes to I want acoustic treatments, surface area matters. We want the interface from air to some kind of different material, because the way that any acoustic panel works is that you are more or less forcing the waves in one medium, the air, to transition to a different medium and lose energy in the form of turning into heat. When it does that, collides with the fibers of the insulation, some of that energy is lost and changed into heat, and it is changing mediums from fibers to air and back to fibers again. And that's how you make that transition happen. When you are severely limiting the surface area, the contact between air and insulation, you're not having a very effective absorber. So how are you going to get a bunch of surface area that is within the joists of the riser that you've created to have contact with the air? Well, I mean, the only reasonable way you could do it and still maintain structural integrity would be to have a riser that only touches the ground on the perimeter and then actually has slots cut into those panels that do go down to the floor, and then have all of the joists inside of the riser elevated. So now you get that air to insulation, surface area matching inside. You can't see it, but you have the slots on the outside that let the air through and interface with the insulation that way. But it means you have all of the joists holding up that riser are elevated, so you've turned it into a drum. I mean, that's what's happened, and we just don't like Tom and I just don't like the experience of doing it that way. So unfortunately, we're going to say, yeah, you're adding a hollow thing to your room, but we're not going to recommend trying to make it into a bass trap. We want it to be inert. Now, my plans for building a riser, I don't think Tom likes very much, because they're stupidly heavy, impossible to remove from the room without fully deconstructing it and carting stuff out of there, and very expensive too, because I like to have an actual platform on the bottom, like plywood or OSB on the bottom, preferably 2 layers with green glue in between so that it's fully damped, then like the joists built directly onto that. Then in the cavities of those joists, lay down some plastic and fill it about 2/5 or 1/2 with sand to make it really dead and inert. The rest of the area, the 3/5 or half that's left, insulation in there, and then double layer of plywood or OSB on top as well, so that you've created a really damped, dense, massive, inert riser that Tom would hate, but would agree is inert and won't bother us when you sit on it.
If you decide to do that, I'm not against it. What I am generally for is things that are not permanent. Like I can't tell you how many times I've thought, this is it, this is the last place I'm ever going to live, or this is it, this is the last car I'm ever going to buy, this is, you know what I mean, or the last pair of headphones I'll ever want, or whatever. There's always, I mean, the subwoofers, last subwoofers I'll ever need, right? My room's never going to get much bigger than this. These are the last subwoofers, and now I'm about to call SVS and try to figure out what the heck's going on with this clanging. So I think that you should build a very inert riser,
which means cross bracing, lots of contact with the floor, not elevating things inside. And then we do want to put insulation into the joist space, because that doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to get expensive insulation, get the cheapest insulation. We just want it stuff, but not to act as an acoustic treatment. It's to avoid having resonance inside of those joist space. What we're trying to do when we say to put insulation inside of a seating riser is ameliorate a problem we just added to the room, not having it like play double duty and solve a problem that was already in the room before the riser existed. We're like, no, we're actually adding a problem, and we're just going to try to mitigate the problem we just added as much as we can. That's why we're putting insulation inside of it, not so much to act as an acoustic treatment. So I mean, us, we want acoustic treatments perhaps more than a lot of other home theater advice that you might find.
Maybe even more than everybody.
Could be. And yet, when it comes to a seating riser, we aren't the ones saying, yep, use that double up as a bass trap, because we just want it inert and we just don't want it resonating and making noise of its own and adding to the weird complexity of the wave pattern in your room. We're like, nope, we just want it to stay still. So, unfortunately, that's not going to be the advice you get from Tom and Rob.
Yeah. Matt already has a room that is dedicated to being a home theater, but he had it set up wider than long with a painted projection screen on the wall and a mismatch of various old speakers. So now the time has come to make some changes and upgrades. He's going to make the layout longer than wide now. It'll be 15 by 17 and a half long by 15 feet wide by 17 and a half long by 7 feet 9 inches high, whatever. He'll be installing a 110-inch acoustically transparent screen on the front wall with a seeing distance of 10 feet, giving him a 43.5 degree field of view. He's decided to go with all KEF in-wall and in-ceiling speakers with a 7.2.4 configuration. Obviously, his new in-wall center speaker will be going behind the new acoustically transparent screen, but should he also put his front left and right speakers behind the screen, or should they position outside the edges of the screen? He's not opposed to the front left and right speakers being visible. The grills can be painted so they can blend into the front wall pretty well, but would it be worth the potential hassle of starting things out with them installed behind the screen and only switch them to being outside of the screen if he notices a narrow soundstage or narrow panning effects? The other side of what will now be his front wall is going to remain unfinished, so moving the in-wall front left and right speakers is not as much of a hassle as it would be in most situations. He's willing to try it if it would be worth it. What do we say? I say it's kind of mathematical where you want to put your speakers, and I don't necessarily think you need to try it out as much as we're talking. Like, if you have physical speakers that you're going to be moving around the room, fine, try it out. But the reality is, it's got your front left and right speakers should be, they don't have to be outside the screen itself, but they do have to be wider than your couch, at the very minimum. Like, that's, and I mean, if you're the minimum.
Strictly going by angles and Dolby diagrams, they would tell you to put your front left and right speakers to the outside edges of your screen. So you've described what gives you a 43.5 degree field of view. The left and right edges of your screen will be at, what is that, plus and minus
21.75?
1.75? Yeah, there you go. So Dolby would tell you that you want the speakers, the front left and right speakers, to be a 45 to 60 degree spread, so wider than your field of view. So, I mean, that tells you right there, if you're strictly going by the angles and the Dolby diagrams, that your front left and right speakers would be wider than the left and right edges of your screen. There's your answer. That's pretty straightforward as far as where Dolby and their diagrams and their angles would be telling you to position your front left and right speakers. If you have no problem with that, visually, that would probably be my advice. I would just, I don't really want to install in-wall speakers twice and do patching, even though it's not quite as large of a hassle as it might be in most rooms. I still just, I don't really want to do it. So, I mean, all the advice is there. You have a 15-foot wide room and, what did you say, 110-inch diagonal screen? So it's not as though you're, going to end up with the front left and right speakers so close to your corners that that's going to be a problem, and they need to be closer together to avoid, weird sidewall reflections or something. No, your room's plenty wide enough with a 110-inch screen that the speakers can go to the outside edges of that screen and still have plenty of space from them to the side walls. So that would be my advice. That's the way I would do it, just looking at the wall, I'd be like, that's where I'm going to put my front left and right speakers, basically just to the outside edges of that screen. That all said, if you put the front left and right speakers just to the inside edges of that screen, just because you think, okay, they're visually hidden that much more, don't even have to worry about painting the grills, they're just going to be completely behind this acoustically transparent screen. I don't think that is suddenly going to be so narrow that you're honestly going to notice it with your ears. I think if you could A/B compare the positions of those speakers at, what is going to essentially be a 42 degree spread because the speakers have a little width to them versus what's going to be a 46 or 47 degree spread, again, because there'll be a little bit to the outside edges of the screen frame. I don't honestly think you're going to hear the difference with that little difference of narrower versus wider. Yours isn't a case where it's going to be a 30 degree spread versus a 60 degree spread where you're definitely going to notice that the speakers are closer together. This is only a couple of degrees difference. So my final answer is I think you can basically do whatever you want and it's going to be fine, acoustically speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that that this is not something we need to cut a bunch of holes in our walls for.
I don't think it would be worth the hassle of having to patch that wall twice at minimum, for having moved the speakers. So I say do whatever you want. I think you'll be fine. If you just want to follow the strict diagram and angle advice, they would go to the outside edges. Yeah.
I'm also not 100% convinced that you need an acoustically transparent screen in this room, unless there's some reason why that screen itself is so close to the floor that you can't put a center channel below it.
Yeah, because a 110-inch screen is not going to be so tall that it would force your center to be on the ground.
If it were me, I would consider just saving all that money and just putting the center below the screen. I just cannot stress to you enough how little it matters. I mean, I have never been in a theater, even with speakers on the ground. Remember the old M&K angled speakers that were meant to be on the ground,
Angle
the front threes?
Yeah.
I've never been in a theater that even had speakers like that, and I was like, ugh. Listen to all that sound coming from the ground.
Right.
It always looks like it's coming from the screen. I'm not
probably a bit more of you have envisioned this. Oh, I'm going to have my center speaker perfectly at ear height. It's the ideal.
Just let me tell you what's going to happen. All the people that have told you that you need to have it at ear height are going to be like, how come you don't have an identical speaker back there? Because that's what they're going to say. They're not going to say...
Well, I mean, he might, because he's going with all KEF in walls, so those don't really change. Left, center, right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I will tell you, timbre matching, I have heard the difference between the left, center, right when they're identical. And you can still hear a difference between them. So, it's a good in theory that doesn't necessarily pan out in real life.
Yeah, you can save a little money, get a regular white
maybe not
screen.
just a little money either. If he's planning on going with like a Seymour AV screen,
silver ticket versus Seymour AV. Yeah, that's a pretty big size price difference there.
But maybe a better projector is what that is.
Yeah, that's true.
John owns a pair of Bic Acoustech PL89 tower speakers. Oh, I was just listening to those the other day. No, I wasn't.
I mean, I have heard them.
He saw a user review where they mentioned unscrewing the horn for the tweeter, rotating it 90 degrees, and screwing it back in, no problem, since the faceplate for the horn is perfectly square and the screw holes all still line up perfectly fine. The user noted that by default, the tweeter horn is taller than it is wide, so he made the assumption that it was creating a narrow dispersion, and he preferred the way the treble sounded with the horn rotated 90 degrees. John has also wished to improve the treble of these speakers, and it sounds like maybe this is an easy fix he was hoping for. Do we think it's worth a try? Any risk in doing so? There's no risk in doing so. I mean, you void your warranty or whatever. I mean, I don't see any reason why if you wanted to just try it out. It's 4 screws out, 4 screws in.
I mean, it's actually 8, but
whatever.
Nonetheless.
It's what it is. I don't think that this is, first of all, this is like the psychological effect of making a change was what this person is hearing right there.
I'm definitely thinking this was more psychoacoustic than truly in a controlled blind test that the difference was noted. But I don't have any problem with you trying this.
Yeah.
This is almost zero risk. There's always the potential that, you're doing a powered screwdriver and something slips and you put a nick in something. But
even with that, I'm just like, I mean, I think my biggest worry would be that you can't get the screws back in tight and you have to put some wood glue or something like that, wood putty or something in there, or maybe just throw some toothpicks or whatever, break them off in the hole to just kind of get the screws to grab again. But I think that's your biggest risk there. But And listen, so
this isn't any sort of extensive mod
in audio, as in many hobbies, including cycling. There are the psychological effects of making a change are sometimes for people just as real as making an actual upgrade. They fade over time. Over time, you'll be like, I don't really think it made that much of a difference. But for a while, you'll be happy. You know, and so knock yourself out, do it. I don't really care. I think that what you really need to do is save money up for better speakers. And I'm not saying that these are bad speakers. I'm saying that these are very good entry level, maybe even a little bit above what most people would consider to be entry level speakers. And they've served you well. It's time to start thinking about an upgrade.
I quite like the Bic Acoustics for certain situations. If you need high sensitivity at a very low price, these are more than a reasonable choice, in my opinion. So I have no problem with someone who has chosen these as their speakers, when you need some high sensitivity and you don't have a ton of money to spend. So I like that a lot. But rotating the tweeter horn, I got no problem with you giving it a try. And if it makes you happy, great. I've got no problem with that either. I don't honestly think in a controlled blind listing test you would genuinely notice the difference, but this is a exceedingly low risk thing for you to try. Go right ahead.
All right. Tyler is putting together his first ever dedicated home theater. He'll be installing a 120-inch 16:9 silver ticket projection screen. He thought he had pretty much made up his mind to get the 5050 UB Epson under $3,000. It fits his budget. And in general, it seems to be a highly regarded projector model, but he read a review, and now things are all gone to crap. A little bit of doubt has crept into his mind. He's a classic movie fan, including lots of black and white movies. He'd estimate that about 40% of his viewings are these older films, while only about 10% is the newer stuff that might be in HDR and all that. The remaining 50% is just normal TV shows and sports, no mention of gaming. So it doesn't sound like this is a gaming kind of person. So
didn't seem so.
No judgment.
Usually people who are heavy gamers, it's kind of a priority, and they mention it.
Kind of comes out. It's like hanging out with a vegan. How do you know they're vegan? It's only a matter of time. They're going to tell you.
Yep.
So he's seen some suggestions that, for classic movie lovers or film lovers, it might be worth going with a Sony projector. That just makes all of the sense, because certainly projector manufacturers would stress only one type of content, and to the detriment of all others, because that's how people make products. You can buy bicycles that are really good at going straight but don't turn very well, and you can buy some that turn very well but don't go straight very well, because that's how bicycle manufacturers work too. Their XW500 ES is their least expensive native 4K resolution.
5,000.
5,000.
There was an extra zero.
Oh, whatever. Native 4K resolution laser-driven model with an MSRP of $6,000. over
double
price.
Double the price, yep.
And a typical street price of $5,500,
Yep.
but he's seen like new units being sold for around the $4,000 mark. Whatever projector he buys, he tends to keep for a good long while, at least 5 to 10 years. He doesn't want a lot of upkeep. He just wants to throw it at the back of the room and not have to think about it. So that's why the laser light engine seems to be appealing to him.
Mm.
Or I like to call it the disposable projector. Because you got to throw it away when the laser light engine dies. But
for most people, it's going to be a good long while, 20,000 hours to half brightness. But yep. Once that's there, that's the end of that projector.
So, how concerned should he be about buying a unit that is marked as used like new? Any pitfalls to look out for? First of all, who's making that determination that it's used like new? Because is it the owner? Because if it was the owner, then I don't know that I would put any stock in that.
I mean, it's the Amazon resellers.
Yes.
They have that listed all the time. Yeah.
And then overall, which projector do we think you should get given all this criteria? First of all, my dude, if you're worried about black and white, first of all, we were just talking about this at the very beginning of the podcast. They didn't actually show, it's not like it's all shot at night and it's in the dark or whatever. I mean, it's just black and white. And a projector that's got good contrast, good black levels and good contrast is going to be good for film of any type.
For the truly classic movies that were shot on black and white film, what happens there, the reason that some displays, when you just leave them at their normal calibration and view black and white movies, again, ones that were actually shot on black and white film, not ones that were recorded on modern cameras and just graded to black and white, ones that were actually shot on black and white film. Back then, the color temperature that was used was warmer. It was redder. It was closer to like a 5800 Kelvin or 5900 Kelvin type of thing instead of the 6500 Kelvin that is the video standard now. So as long as you're willing to do a picture mode switch when you're actually going to shot on black and white film and just have the white point, the white balance set to be warmer, the color temperature set to be warmer when you're watching actually shot on black and white films, any projector can do that. By default, yes, you're going to calibrate them to the 6500 Kelvin. That is the current video standard. And then there's the whole thing of, well, some releases on disc have been regraded so that even on 6500 Kelvin displays, they look warmer and redder and more of those sepia tones that we got on those classically shot movies. But there are certainly releases that were done where they just look too blue, too cool in color temperature when you watch them on a 6500 Kelvin display, but you can adjust that. You can adjust that to be a warmer color temperature when you're watching your classic black and white movies. So any projector can do that. The XW5000 ES specifically, that Sony, I'm not the biggest fan, and I'm sorry to any people who bought it and love it. I'm not saying it's a bad projector. I'm just saying some of the compromises they made to get that laser-driven native 4K model down to that $6,000 price point, which is still double the budget that you were actually looking to spend, they did sacrifice on the lens a bit. It's not the bestest lens. Usually Sony lenses are fantastic, and they're more expensive models are, but the 5000 ES, they sacrificed a bit on the lens. It is a purely manual lens with not nearly as much range as we're used to from Sony projectors. So he mentions, I want to throw it at the back of the room and forget about it. You might not even have that throw distance with the 5000 ES. You got to be pretty careful about that. Whereas with the 5050 UB, it has a huge throw range available and a huge zoom range available, so no problem there. But yeah, that 5000 ES, the lens, I'm not over the moon about. It has a couple of other drawbacks to it, like it doesn't have any HDMI 2.1 whatsoever, which the 5050 UB wouldn't either. Both of them are HDMI 2.0, but once you get to that price point, you're kind of like, really? Don't have an HDMI 2.1 on that 5000 ES? It doesn't reach DCI P3 like even remotely so. It's about 80 to 85 at best % of DCI P3, whereas the 5050 UB is 95 to 100%. So when it does come to that wide color, like the 5050 UB is actually quite a bit more capable. So all in all, I wouldn't be over the moon about going to the 5000 ES. what I would say to you is, if you're really enamored by the idea of a laser light engine, which Tom has just said, like, we're not really super keen on doing that. We kind of actually prefer the idea that for the $1,000 or $2,000 price difference, you can buy lamps when you need to. Like, you're going to still be ahead price-wise, and then you will always have a nice bright image whenever you want it. Whereas, with the laser, you can't replace it. But Epson does have their own laser models. They have their LS11000 and their LS12000 at $4,000 or $5,000 respectively. The LS12000 even has a dedicated black and white picture mode if you're super enamored by that. And those ones do have HDMI 2.1, and they can do 4K 120 if you want to. Like you're saying, you might keep this for 10 years. We don't know. We might have variable refresh rate video productions that start being used. You'd be ready for all of that with an LS12000 or an LS11000. So if you are going to break your budget and spend more than the 50/50 UB, I would suggest sticking with Epson and getting either the 11,000 or the 12,000. But my real advice is, I think you got it right the first time. I think the 50/50 UB is the right choice here. It is considerably better than any other projector that is less or the same price as it. You can definitely adjust it to look wonderful with black and white movies. The contrast that it has is on par or better than the Sony projectors as far as just black and white contrast that it has. It has wider color. It handles HDR really well. And yes, eventually you'll need to replace the lamp on it. If you do keep it for 10 years, I would expect you to replace the lamp twice maybe in that time span. But it's not that hard. It's not that hard. And overall, you'll still be ahead on price. So I would say you got it right the first time. Get a 50/50 UB. I think you'll be really happy with it. You're saying this is your first dedicated movie theater that you're putting together, I think? Is that what he said?
Yeah, so.
First dedicated home theater. You're going to be over the moon with what the 50/50 UB gives you for under $3,000. I think it's the right choice.
As long as he's not comparing it to an OLED, he'll be fine.
Sure.
That's true of all projectors, though. Larry already has a dual subwoofer set up in place, a pair of SVS PB1000 Pro subs. He picked up a third subwoofer for us, SVS PB1000 Non-Pro, with the intention of positioning it directly behind the back of his primary seat as a near-field sub. Mm-hmm. You can contact the SVS to get their advice on the best settings. They told him to set the PB1000's filter to 50 Hertz. Side note, in Larry's email, he says he was told to set it to subwoofer's high-pass filter to 50 Hertz, which, okay.
Doesn't exist. So I mean, somebody might have said that, or Larry himself might have made a mistake. I'm not sure where that goes, but I just did want to quickly repeat. It's to remember what is the high pass filter versus the low pass filter. Insert the word can.
Yeah.
Right? High can pass versus low can pass.
It's a low pass filter on subwoofers. It's letting the low frequencies through. That's
right. The low frequencies can pass on a subwoofer filter, so it would be a low pass filter that is built into the PB1000.
Yes, it's very important. Mm-hmm. But Larry has a Denon X3800H receiver with his 4 independent subwoofer pre-outs. He's thinking the Denon should handle all the crossover settings with the Nearfield PB1000 just using its LFE input in bypass mode. What do we say is the correct way to set all this up? I say don't use near-field subwoofers. I think I've said that for a lot of years, and I'm not going to stop saying it. I started saying it when HSU started selling near-field, the mid-bass woofer is what they used to call it. Modules, that's right. Modules, and I started saying it then. I don't like them. I don't see. I think you get a mini. You get a mini DSP and use the multi-sub optimizer software, and you do that. That's what you do.
Yeah, there is no way in your room to separate the sound wave interactions and say, well, because I put this subwoofer physically close to my seats, but these other two subwoofers in diagonally opposite corners or across the room from each other, that, the one that's right by my seat, that's only going to shake my seat. It's not going to affect what I hear, because what I'm hearing is coming from my two far-field subwoofers. There's no way to do that. The sound waves are all going to interact. They're all reflecting. All the bass frequencies are longer than any of the dimensions of your room. You are never hearing or feeling the direct sound from any of your three subwoofers. They are always, all of them, interacting with the room, and you are only ever hearing or feeling sound that has reflected off of at least probably more than one of the surfaces in your room. There's no way around it. You can't I know conceptually, you're like, this one's close, so it's the one that's physically kicking me in the butt. Yeah. But these other two are the ones that I'm listening to from my
still
DSP.
needs to
There's
make
no way to do it.
DSP no matter how he wants to make this thing work, I think.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do what you wanted to do, which is to only play some frequencies near you.
And I mean, usually if you're saying what I want is the tactile sensation from my Nearfield sub, you would use a high pass and a low pass filter and just limit the range of that Nearfield sub to from 40 to 80 and nothing else. It doesn't play below 40, it doesn't play above 80, and that would be kind of the typical thing. But I don't like doing that, because what does it do? It screws up 40 to 80 hertz and a little above and below that too, because it is a filter slope, not a brick wall at 40 and 80 hertz, and you just messed everything up. You have to recalibrate everything as a 3 subwoofer setup anyway. So yeah, I'm in agreement with Tom. I get how you just think about it and you go, well, that seems appealing. I'm gonna have a subwoofer right behind my seat and it's gonna be kicking me in the back. But if that's what you want, the tactile sensation, I would use a tactile transducer. By the way, your X3800 has a dedicated tactile transducer output as an option, so that would be a way to do that terrifically if that's what you were after. If you wanted louder bass, then I have no problem using that third subwoofer, but yeah, Tom nailed it. You get a mini DSP and use the multi-sub optimizer software. Don't try to do what I think you had in mind.
Right.
So we're giving you a different answer than what you had in mind, and a different answer from what SVS told you. But yeah, that would be the way that we would approach this.
So if you did want to do the high pass, low pass thing in order to put it in there, you would still need a mini DSP. You would send the subwoofer output through the mini DSP into the subwoofer and use the software on the mini DSP.
Yeah, because on the X3800, even though it is independent settings for the distances and levels of the subwoofers, it is not independent crossovers on each of those subwoofer pre-outs, and it is not independent equalization on each of those. So if you want to do a true multi-sub, you're going to need a mini DSP to apply independent EQ to each of those 3 subs. If you want to do different crossover frequencies for that third subwoofer, you're going to need a separate device to do that too. So, I mean, what SVS was advising would mean that it is only playing from 50 hertz and lower, which isn't really the tactile area. I mean, 40 to 50 hertz is, but the tactile kick you in the chest, kick you in the back area is 40 to 80 hertz. It's higher in frequency than you might imagine. So, yep, we don't agree with SVS's advice. We also don't agree with Nearfield subs in general type of thing. So we've got a completely separate answer for you.
We got lots of problems with this idea, then where all of them involve you not doing it. You can do it. I don't care what you do. But I think that if you're going to have 3 subs, set them up as 3 subs. Just have 3 subs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that
can work really well. Or if what you really wanted was to get kicked in the backboard, use that tactile transducer output on your X3800.
Yes.
It's there. Use it.
That's what it's for. Or build yourself a riser and turn it into to a bass.
A riser that we don't like and turn it into a non-linear drum. What fun.
Which will only vibrate during certain frequencies, and when it does, it's gonna vibrate a whole lot. Man, that is so distracting. I just cannot tell you how distracting that is. Max, a couple of comments before Max's questions. Max found Joe and Tell's interview with Eric Newman from Odyssey Labs very informative and useful. The bit we mentioned last week about Odyssey's auto leveling between the subwoofers and speakers helped him understand why creating a bass boost in the Odyssey editor app didn't deliver the expected results. When then issued the firmware update that made DRAC available, it also fixed the tactile transducer subwoofer pre-out option, where you can choose to dedicate the 4th subwoofer pre-out to sending an unaltered signal to your tactile transducer. Prior to the firmware update, that option wasn't working properly. Did not know that. Now we do.
Indeed. So great updates there. And like we were just talking about with the last question, applies to that. But hey, Max is letting us know it does work now, as promised. That was a feature they mentioned, and now it works.
On to his questions. Max bought the 98-inch TCL TV to replace his projection setup. He's very happy with it. But since the 98-inch model has a unique model number, he hasn't been able to find suggested picture settings online that are specific to that model. He has a Spears and Munsell setup disk and figured he could just adjust the picture settings himself using that. But looking through the TV's menus, there's a serious lack of any calibration controls, and the only manual available is a very simple quick start guide. So do we have any suggestions for perhaps a TCL TV model that's similar enough that he can follow the suggested picture settings? And then how does he access the more advanced picture controls that we're used to? I mean, it's a model in a line, and usually.
Well, the series is a series of one. It is the R754, right? Like, that's why he looked up R754, and the only model in the R754 series is the 98-inch. They gave it a unique model number. But happily, what I can tell you is it's an R655. It's the same processing. I mean, the panel, of course, is a 98-inch version that probably does have some unique properties to it. But in terms of what does this TV behave like, it behaves exactly like the 6 series from that model year, the R655. So, ratings, they do have a nice list of settings for the R655, not for the 754, the 98-inch only 754, but they do have the R655, and if you input those, you're going to be well within the ballpark. You're not going to be wildly out of spec if you put those in. So that is where you can go for what you asked for. They're a model similar enough. Now, where are all the settings that we're used to? They're in the app. They're only in the Roku app. This does run Roku, just like the R655 does. They're in the Roku app. You have to get the app on your phone to access all of the picture calibration settings that we're used to finding. They aren't available through the user menu of just the Roku remote that came with the TV on screen. So that's where you'd find them all. Artings actually describes that in their picture settings and in their review of the R655 series. So you can find additional information there if you need it. But yeah, it's in the app, and plug in those settings and you'll be all right.
All right, he bought a PB2000 1.5 years ago. He paired it with his PB12 NSD in his room that is roughly 23 by 15 with slanted attic ceiling. The room is enclosed now that he's added a door. So it's a very nice looking home theater, actually.
We have seen this room before. He's added more acoustic treatment since we saw it last.
Yay.
I think maybe a seating upgrade. I don't remember those seats in there before. I think that's some different seats in there. But anyway, yes, his two subwoofers are on the midpoints of the two side walls.
So when he got his first PB2000, it immediately died, and SVS sent a replacement driver right away after determining that was a problem. Now, 1.5 years later, that replacement driver seems to be dying again. He sent SVS a video of the problem using the opening of Edge of Tomorrow played at -20 on the master volume dial to demonstrate. From that video, SVS identified that the port was chuffing, there was obvious distortion, and there was a ticking sound that they said might indicate that the suspension is starting... Excuse me, dog. Excuse me.
There is a doggo moving around.
Can you get back up there? Now lie down. So go have your little weird panic attack someplace else. Ticking sound that they said might indicate the suspension is starting to stretch and the voice coil might be rocking a bit and barely hitting the motor gap. Despite master volume being at -20, he measured the 20 Hz tone playing at 107 dB, but the PB2000 was unable to play that tone any louder. He's using a mini DSP to connect both his PB2000 and his PB12 NSD. The 12 NSD has its trim set 2.9 dB higher overall, but in terms of the filters applied by the mini DSP, they're all negative values to cut down on peaks. No boosting filters are being applied to anything. He was rather surprised that SVS's response this time was just to simply tell him to avoid playing known torture tests like the opening of Edge of Tomorrow at high volume levels. It's not that that advice doesn't make sense, it's just that from everything we and many other people online have said, he was under the impression that SVS's subs are well protected and basically cannot be overdriven. I thought so too. We're in the same boat here. He didn't think his room size would be a problem for the PB2000 model, so did he simply misunderstand about SVS's DSP protection and hitting reference volume, or did he maybe set up something wrong? Yeah, I don't know, because I'm in the same boat as you right now. I'm also going to be contacting SVS about this sound, which I think has been happening from the very beginning, and it's. I mean, I don't know that it has, but I don't know that it hasn't. So we're going to be kind of talking about the same things with them. And as far as the subwoofer being protected, it should be protected. I mean, that's like sort of the whole thing. The fact that it's having a problem, your room size is not enough. What did I say it was? 15 by something?
Right? It was like
23 by 15. That's basically a little bit about the size of my room, and a
PB2000. I mean, it's 107 dB at your seat, at 20 hertz. I mean, that is pretty darn loud.
Yes.
And it would seem that if it's producing that when your master volume is set to -20 that there is something a little bit off there, because that would indicate that if it were possible, it would be playing 127 dp at 20 hertz, which is not right. I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe he's input the Harman curve, with the 17 dB boost. If you've done that, like we talked about last week, I don't necessarily agree with doing that, because that is a descriptive, not prescriptive curve that they measured, and I would try to get closer to just actually going for reference volume in there, rather than having, say, a 17 dB boost at 20 hertz. So that's not out of the question. It is possible that you have sent this subwoofer a signal that is honestly too loud. That just, I'm speculating a bit here on putting together the pieces of the information that he sent us. That's not completely out of the question. Of course, having the mini DSP in the signal path does give you the potential to send out a higher voltage signal than the AV receiver would have been sending by itself.
Right.
So I would consider, as a test at least, connecting that PB2000 subwoofer directly to the subwoofer pre-out of your AV receiver, doing just a normal Odyssey calibration and seeing if any of this still happens, because it isn't out of the question with the equipment that you have, with the possible EQ you might have input to the mini DSP, that there really is an overvoltage being sent, that the signal is in fact clipping when it gets that high. Like, there was the signal off of the disc, and then because of what potentially might have been added in gain, voltage gain from the mini DSP, that the signal itself is clipping, and the subwoofer is actually playing that. Like, the subwoofer isn't clipping, that it's playing a clipped signal.
Yeah.
That isn't completely out of the question in this scenario. I'm not saying that's what you did for sure, but it's possible given everything that you've described. So I would do what I said, try connecting it straight to the AV receiver, normal Odyssey calibration, play that scene again, and if there's no problem from the sub when you do that, I would have my suspicions that there is something in the signal chain at that point, that maybe the signal itself is clipped and the subwoofer is actually playing it, and that's why it sounds like that. It's not impossible, because you were playing a real scene, not a test tone or something like that. But also going right back to when you first got this sub, because the only thing that swapped out was the driver. Is it possible that that subwoofer actually had an amplifier problem all along?
Right.
You said SVS identified that the driver was the problem, but I don't know. Like, I don't know for sure. It's not completely out of the question that the amplifier had a problem all along. It just wasn't normally detectable. So there's a couple of things in there where I still have questions in my mind. I'm not 100% sure in either direction there. I, too, am ever so slightly surprised that SVS's response was, just don't do that. Hey, doc, it hurts when I do this. Just don't do that. That isn't normally what we get from SVS customer service, but we don't know what the entire conversation has been. Right. We don't know everything that they went through. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And I would do the test. I think it's worth it in this case.
Okay. Well, who do we have left, Rob?
Okey-doke. I think there's just one on the list right now, Mark. And then I did want to let JD, who sent in his question early Monday morning as far as my time zone, that I did receive your question. So there it is. You'll be up next week.
All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 139 patrons over at patreon.com, and those that sent us notes of gratitude, including Matt, Gurinder, Eric, Bob, Joseph, Ryan, Tyler, Mike, and Karl.
There it is. Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation if you'd like to. Big thanks to our 139 patrons over there. It ticked up a little bit. Went up a little bit. Yay, we're getting close to 140 again. And then to 150 one day.
And beyond.
And then that's right. And thank you from me as well to Matt, Gurinder, Eric, Bob, Joseph, Ryan, Tyler, Mike, and Karl. We very much appreciate your notes of gratitude and encouragement. And a big thanks to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. No, I can actually say, now go out and listen to something. I was saying I was waiting for the World Health Organization to declare that we are no longer in a global pandemic. They did that. So I'm going to go ahead and say, now go out and listen to something.
Yay! Go out and listen to something. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.